phone.
We did.
And you know, since you've been so supportive of us, we just figured we should get you a gift.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And you don't have to write about us anymore.
No, I think I'll keep doing
We're
that.
going to put it on a desk right between our desk, and then when you have that urge, just call us.
No, you know what
Talk
I'm
to
going to
us.
do?
We won't write.
I actually don't have a phone, which is really exciting for me.
Perfect.
Secondly, I'm going to ride this puppy till the end, just so you know. I'm not giving up now or forever until you're either the biggest thing in the world or you're done. So, and I think Steve Case over there understands that situation.
Yeah.
So
We're looking forward to it.
Steve Case, no, not at all done. At one point he goes, "You don't care if we go up or down." I'm like, "No, really, no. Both stories are good for me." He did well, the little Zuckerberg, little Mark.
Well, he did well in this. This is D6, I think.
I was apologizing to him because I called him a toddler CEO, and I shouldn't have done that.
Later you said that. Steve, I think,
apologize
was
for
probably
toddler.
pretty gracious. That was
Right.
amazing. Because you've gotten a chance to spend time with him on and off camera, because Facebook subsequently has gone from, this was 300 million users, now it's a billion. Where is he for you?
I locate him in the tradition of people who had a great idea and then executed very well on that idea. Because often a great idea, at least in tech, I can't speak for, I don't know, the chemical industry or something, is not, you're not the only person with that idea, but you execute it better than the other people. That requires, and this is not an excuse, nobody should be excused for being mean to people or rude to people or any of these other things, but it does require a certain, you know, megalomania almost about pushing through the idea. And I imagine that if we had known the steel magnets or the car magnets in those old days, they were kind of probably had some of that in them. So I locate Mark in that tradition. I think he's young, and I think the company's just going public, and I think you can't speak even in the terms of the digital world, which is very young. It really began in 1977.
He's the founders running all these companies. Just
yeah,
think
you
about
can't know where he's going to be in the span of, say, Bill Gates' career or Jobs' career. Obviously.
Well, so speaking
so
of those two guys.
I think Mark is a great entrepreneur. I actually like Mark a lot. I have a thing called a productivity to prick ratio.
Yeah.
And he's rather low because I think he's a learning organism.
Who's high?
I'm not saying. Many people of less success, actually, interestingly enough, except for one. And he's a learning organism, and that's why I like him as an entrepreneur compared to a lot of others, is that after this, he got really good at speaking and probably got better. Okay, not really good. He's never going to be really good. But he improved, and so he's a learning organism, and that's what I do like about him, is he loves the products, and so he changes things. And I have you don't know what's going to happen to Facebook, and this last earnings was a little worrisome, like they have to figure out the thing. Yeah. But you can't deny the constant innovation that he continues to spur there. And I like that about him particularly. And you know, the depiction he had in that movie at such a young age, which is not like him at all, was, you know.
I don't want to talk about the movie.
But anyway.
But here's what I do want to talk about, because there are examples of two entrepreneurs who've consistently showed up at D one who's no longer with us, but who've run very mature companies. I'd like to talk about them together and apart by showing some footage.
Are you going to make a tablet? What do you think about the tablet?
No plans at the current time to make a tablet, no.
One of the things I've said to you before is I'm as proud of the products that we have not done as I am of the ones we have done.
What's your favorite thing you've not done?
PDA.
What about a PDA?
We thought about this a lot. We believe the cell phones are going to do that. And we saw that several years ago. We just see the curve of cell phones going like this. You're going to have a phone in your pocket, so that's going to have to be the device that carries this information. We didn't think that we were going to be successful in the cell phone business because of the carriers.
Apple's greatest successes have not been in the Fortune 500. Right. And part of that is because we're not very good going through orifices to get to the end users, right?
So you're always a big fan of that. He stayed with that quite a bit in his different talks.
Yes,
that's a combination of D1 and D2. When you look back on that footage now,
he went through the orifice.
Yes. When you look back on that footage now, where do you locate Steve's iPhone and tablet projects? This is now 10 years ago. 9 years ago.
Can I start just saying?
Yeah.
He lied about them all at D, which was funny. He'd say, fourth year it happened or something like that, we said, what are you working on, and what you aren't working on, so that he would say, and then we would realize that was the product they were working on. So it was interesting, because he said he wasn't going to do a phone, and then the phone came out the next year. He said he wasn't going to do a tablet, and so.
I take a little different view. I think
Yeah,
he
and
did.
that was closer, Kara. This is early.
This is pretty early.
Yeah.
This is very early.
I think that what he wound up doing on the phone, I'm not saying he didn't find wording, he's like, no plans at the present.
Right.
He eventually revealed, both in the Isaacson book and at D, that they actually had come up first with software he thought would work on a tablet, and then he shelved the tablet and decided to do it on the phone.
interesting.
And then after the phone was a success, he pulled it down and turned that into the iPad. But
he shared that with you at the last time he appeared.
but
he was unbelievably
what
honest
he
in
did about
last
that
appearance.
orifice question
Yeah.
was, and we might disagree a little about this a little bit, was he was the first handset maker that I know of to actually strike a deal with a carrier where the carrier had no power over the design of the handset. Carrier's name wasn't even on it. The carrier had nothing to say about it. The iPhone was sold through AT&T. They subsidized it, but they did, for the subsidy, they got profits, they got sales, they got activations.
Services profits.
But they got a lot of that ARPU, you know, average revenue per user, which is the big metric in their industry. But they did not get to put a single craplet bloatware app on the screen of that phone. They did not even get to know very far in advance what they signed the original deal when seeing a drawing of the phone. So he did something nobody had ever done. It was because he was him, and he had a big brand, and they were renaming their company, relaunching their company, and they wanted to launch with a big brand that no one else had. Right. So he did avoid. That was the way he evaded that orifice problem.
But what's interesting, I mean, this was the key, to me, the key invention of the last 10 years, is what he was able to do in that moving it forward. He moved it, and he was going to do it with television, I think. That was his next thing. He talked about it at the last D, Apple TV, and changing the television industry. And so he was interested in disruption, but it had to be his way, and that was the only way it was going to happen, which was, we're lucky that they listened, that he had that kind of force of personality. But they're all the same, all these entrepreneurs are like, from Steve Case to him.
And Bill Gates, too.
And Bill Gates,
Well,
too.
speaking of Bill Gates.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Macintosh software dating game.
My name is Bill Gates. I'm chairman of Microsoft. And during 1984, Microsoft expects to get half of its revenues from Macintosh software.
But what's the greatest misunderstanding between in your relationship and about each other? What would you say would be this idea of catfight, this idea of which one of the many?
We've kept our marriage secret for over a decade now.
No, it's been fun to work together. And I actually kind of miss some of the people aren't around anymore. You know, people come and go in this industry. It's nice when somebody sticks around. And
You know, I think of most things in life as either a Bob Dylan or a Beatles song. But there's that one line in that one Beatles song, you and I have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead. And that's clearly true here.
That was fantastic line.
How did you do this? How did you get them to do it?
You should have been in the green room, let's just say.
So we talked about it really almost from the start of D. And we were lucky. Bill Gates was very generous and came pretty much every year. Steve Jobs came
a lot
every year when he was healthy enough to come. And it was unusual because it was the only conference he came to, unless you consider Macworld an actual conference, independent conference, which it wasn't, because his part of Macworld was completely controlled by Apple. It was the place where he made his announcements. So we were lucky. And we talked about getting them together almost from the start.
That was my
And one year, I just said, I'm going to try it. And I started with Jobs, because I thought he would be the likeliest to say no. And I called him, and he said, if you get Bill to actually do this, and if he agrees that we can, you know, try to keep it on a high level, I'll do it. And I was astonished. I mean, it wasn't, we didn't say call me next week, call me next month. He said this almost impulsively in 15 minutes on the phone. So I then went to Gates, and he said, Steve really agreed to this?
We knew that if Jobs agreed, Gates would agree, because Gates had more of an envy.
Because Gates spoke at a lot of conferences anyway, and it was just going to be easier.
But he'd been evolving too, right? I mean,
yeah, so he agreed. And see, this took place, first of all, it was 2007, so it was 30 years after the introduction of the mass market personal computer, which they'd both worked on, Jobs from the hardware side, Gates from the software side. And Gates was within about a year or 18 months of stepping away from his day-to-day job at Microsoft. It had already been announced. And Jobs had already had cancer and recovered, and nobody knew that he was going to die as young as he did, but clearly his mortality was already an issue. He looked healthy. And
this was after his first bout.
But it was after his first pancreatic cancer bout.
Pancreatic cancer.
So there was something personal going on for both of them, and we put out a press release immediately, so they couldn't back out. We actually did. And let me tell you,
That's a real strategy.
That's a real that was a strategy.
Tip. We were
and here's how we did the press release. I was driving. I have a.
We should have done that with you guys. Yeah. Thankfully, you're here.
I wasn't going to come because I can't stand him. But.
We were driving from LAX to Palm Springs. Not Karen, me, but Katie Barrett, who's my reviewing colleague at the Journal. She was driving. I was riding, and I was on the phone with Katie Cotton, who's the head PR person at Apple, and Larry Cohen, who was the head PR person at Microsoft at the time, who I think they told me they had not actually ever spoken to each other before this call. And me.
The conference call.
And we were negotiating about a 4-paragraph press release. And I negotiated this press release. They both favored the joint appearance, so they saw the strategy of the press release, they liked it, they knew both of their bosses could change their minds, so they were kind of on our side on this, and we put the press release out.
It was important,
but it still almost fell apart.
It's still apart. I mean, because I'll tell very quickly, the green room was the best part of all of the entire experiences, because you know what, they didn't really like each other, though they liked each other. There was still so much competition between them.
But it's like a lot of human relationships.
But it was amazing
because they respected each other, but they also didn't like each other.
So at the conference,
so they were not. This is like there were never dinners. There was no socializing.
Well, a little bit,
not much. Among the two of them.
My understanding is
they had sat together at D.
Yes, we made them sit together at D.
I saw that photograph where they
made them sit together at dinner at D when they weren't.
We boxed them out.
Right.
With people. Yeah,
nice.
We did. Yeah.
But so what happened was, at that D, where the two of them appeared together, we agreed, as part to sweeten the deal, we agreed to give Apple and Microsoft also an additional slot in the conference. Microsoft used it to promote Steve Ballmer, who was going to take over, and one of us interviewed him. I don't remember. And then Apple did what Apple always did, which was to only allow Jobs to represent them. So he had an individual slot in the afternoon before they did this thing, which was an evening thing. And during that interview, I said to him, you know, iTunes has become one of the biggest and most commonly used programs on Windows, which is true. It's true today. You know, there's hundreds of millions, if not 1 billion copies of iTunes, way more than the iPods and iPhones, iPads they've sold, because people use it as just a music program and a whatever. I said, how does it feel to be a major Windows developer? And he said, it feels like giving a glass of ice water to someone in hell.
He couldn't